I should have killed 400 or 500 people. Then I would have felt better. Then when I felt like I really offered society something. You know, if I wanted to kill somebody, I'd take this book and beat you to death with it, and I wouldn't feel a thing.
This video includes allegations of sexual assault. If you or anyone you know has been a victim of sexual assault, help is available. Visit the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network website or contact RAIN's National Helpline. No one wants to live in fear. Being able to go outside and live your life to the fullest is one of the most important aspects of being an American, and it's a right countless numbers of people have died to defend. Unfortunately, sometimes the biggest threats are just outside our doorstep, lurking in the minds of depraved and nefarious individuals. For decades, communities throughout the country have had to fear uncaught serial killers and criminals, some of whom stay prominent due to extensive media coverage. Today, everywhere you look, there is something to fear or be worried about, and it seems like every day the list only gets bigger and bigger. Looking back, there are quite a few Americans you can add to that list of frightful things. The most feared women in the U.S. are another story altogether. Here it's time to look at America's most feared men. Among former American presidents, Abraham Lincoln consistently stands out as one of the most revered and respected. We look at him now as playing a pivotal role in the abolition of enslavement, and his untimely death sealed his legacy as one of America's most famous leaders. His Gettysburg Address, given on the site of one of the bloodiest battles in American history, is still considered a standard by many for public oration. Without Lincoln, the America of today would not exist, and would likely be radically different. However, it's hard to underestimate just how much a huge portion of the country feared Lincoln upon his nomination and election to the presidency. When Lincoln won the presidency in 1860, Southerners and Northern Democrats who supported the institution of enslavement were incredibly scared of him and the changes he was going to make. They were so worried about him abolishing enslavement that before he was even inaugurated, 7 states decided to secede from America. Never before had citizens been so distrustful of a president that they actually left the Union. In all, 11 states formed the Confederacy and fought against Lincoln in one of the bloodiest wars in American history. Today, Lincoln is one of the most beloved presidents of all, but at one time and among a large swath of the population, he was also the most feared. Even today, for those who can remember him, Charlie Manson is still a haunting individual. Many see him as the personification of evil in America, and his legacy is that of bloodshed and terror. Manson is infamous for his role in the Tate and LaBianca murders that occurred in California in the late 1960s. Followers of Manson, who called themselves the Manson family, carried out the murders, which shocked and unnerved Los Angeles. While Manson was not one of the people who participated in the killings, he was still convicted and imprisoned for his role. Manson was the impetus behind the murders, and he had slowly been manipulating members of the group for several years to get them to do his bidding. After his conviction in 1971, in one of the most infamous and nationally followed trials in U.S. history, Manson spent more than 45 years in California prison, finally dying in 2017. During his trial, he acted increasingly bizarre and violent, and he later carved a swastika into his forehead. The court originally sentenced him to death, but that was later changed to life in prison. Even though he was in prison for most of his adult life, Manson's name and likeness still spread fear wherever it appeared. His public interviews were combative at times, and he refused to express remorse over the killings. Even today, the Manson name is still synonymous with fear.
Vallejo Police Department.
I want to report a double murder.
May I have your
If you
name
go 1
and
mile
where you're
east on Columbus Parkway, public park, you'll find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye.
Among infamous American serial killers, the Zodiac Killer stands out as a particularly frightening case. As of 2023, his identity has never been discovered, and no one knows if it was a single person acting alone, several independent people, a group, or something even more sinister. The Zodiac Killer first came to attention in 1969, following a series of unsolved murders beginning the year prior. Though they did not identify themselves, the killer took public responsibility for several killings and made a habit of communicating with authorities and newspapers after carrying out their gruesome murders. Understandably, people in the Bay Area were on edge about the potential to become another Zodiac victim. The authorities' inability to capture the killer or stop his killings was not reassuring, and their taunts in the form of ciphers were chilling to read and hear about. It's unknown how many killings the Zodiac Killer is responsible for, or if a single individual was even responsible for them all, and so anywhere from 5 to more than a dozen murders are linked to them. Several potential suspects have been floated as possible Zodiacs, but no one has ever been convicted for any of the killings associated with his legend. Maybe the Zodiac Killer still lurks out there today, and his likeness is certainly still terrifying. For many people, just the name Ted Kaczynski is enough to send a shiver down their spine. A Chicago native, Kaczynski is a graduate of both Harvard and the University of Michigan. Just over a decade after completing his PhD at Michigan, Kaczynski started terrorizing the country. He sent bombs in the mail to various targets, which would explode once they tried to open them. His targets were seemingly random and included academics and business executives, as well as several colleges in Chicago and California. People everywhere lived in fear of opening a mail bomb. From 1978-1995, Kaczynski killed 3 people and injured 23 through his attacks. For years, the authorities could not track down or find out who was responsible for the bombings, leaving Kaczynski at large and able to continue his actions. The first death attributed to Kaczynski occurred in 1985, and he continued to bomb for another 10 years. Eventually, he acquired the sobriquet of the Unabomber, which was based on the FBI's name for their investigation. In 1995, several media outlets published Kaczynski's manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, after authorities thought doing so could help the investigation. It worked, and it was his brother David Kaczynski who helped authorities discover the identity of the Unabomber. Authorities arrested Kaczynski, and he was sentenced to several life sentences after pleading guilty to multiple charges. His crimes still loom large in the minds of many, but at least he can't bomb anyone ever again. Of all the things California had to worry about in the 1970s, 1980s, the mystery of the Golden State Killer may have been the most haunting and chilling of all. For many years, his identity was a mystery, and it was not until 2018 that advances in criminology technology led to his capture. We now know his name is Joseph DeAngelo, but for many years he was simply the Golden State Killer. A former police officer, DeAngelo started his spate of killings and sexual assaults in 1975. For years, he terrorized the Bay Area, killing and sexually abusing both individuals and couples. He is thought to have been active from 1975-1981 and again in 1986 for the rape and murder of another 18-year-old woman. The police were unable to track him or convict anyone of the murders for decades, leaving many in the Bay Area fearful of becoming another victim. The case made national headlines, and the fact that no one could identify DeAngelo only made him more terrifying. In 2018, after decades of no activity, the police arrested DeAngelo and charged him with more than a dozen counts of first-degree murder. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, but the fear he brought will never be forgotten.